Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofOutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Dinah Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and to everything in between. This is podcast episode 134, and we're in week 20 of the Drums of Autumn read-along. This episode we will be covering chapters 37 through 39. It's all about Roger Mack. I titled this episode, A Wolf in Captain's Clothing. And the summary goes something like this. Roger learns what being a seaman means. It's tougher and lonelier than he expected. His goodness and love for others cannot be helped. He must do whatever he must when others are in trouble. His good Samaritan ways are found out. The good captain shows his teeth. The coin is flipped. Roger lives to see another day. Inside the chapters. Chapter 37, Gloriana. Roger is quickly disabused of the idea his physical health and prowess pose an advantage over the less nourished crew members. By the end of one shift, he is exceedingly hungry, bone-weary, with hands chapped and chafed, and muscles incredibly sore. The work conditions were hard and difficult, though others didn't seem to take much heed of it. On the second day, his size proved to be useful. It took 2 days to finish the loading. Barrels of salt, bolts of cloth, huge crates of ironmongery that had to be lowered with rope slings because of their weight. It was here that Roger's size proved of benefit. At the end of a rope belayed around the capstan, he leaned back against the weight of a crate suspended at the other end. And muscles popping with the strain, lowered it slowly enough that the 2 men below could catch and guide it into place in the increasingly crowded hold. Once the cargo was loaded, the passengers came aboard. Many had indenture contracts the captain would sell once they reached the Colonies. They would be given passage, but only fed if they could pay for it during the voyage. Roger helped passengers board. He was struck by the women layered with all the clothing they owned. The people had all their earthly possessions, desperate to find a better life for their children and families across the ocean. He notices one young family of a man, woman, and baby. The woman has something different about her that tells Roger she is a fighter. His pondering is disturbed by the call to get the last of the cargo aboard. After the initial weather departing from Scotland, the weeks passed with a smooth voyage and rhythm. Many of the passengers had been seasick, though. The smell of vomit commingled with all the other scents aboard the Gloriana. Roger is thankful he was able to acclimate his keen sense of smell quickly. I think our 21st century sensibilities for cleanliness are unlike any other time in history. We're obsessed that we overclean and disrupt proper good bacterial levels on our skin and other surfaces. That bacteria is there to combat the bad or dangerous bacteria. Just the body odor and bad breath might fell a modern-day person. Though Diana writes, the travelers all have some form of illness or disease immunity, it's not true. They likely would cause mass illness among everyone they met until their biome changed to something more like those of the period. They would all be veritable plague carriers. It's true, and they would never have retroactive immunity. He notes his crewmates are leery of him, though not hostile. It could be his accent or size that keeps them slightly away from him. With the shipmates at a distance, Roger had plenty of time to think outside of his expected work. The captain is hard but fair and always turns a profit. Roger ignored the reputation of the captain and Gloriana before signing on. He would have traveled with Captain Ahab if he would have been going to North Carolina. He noted the invisible barrier that seemed to surround the captain. Only 2 crew members directly spoke to him. The other crew members did their best not to be noticed by him. Regardless of the disposition of the captain, Roger is more interested in the passengers who came aboard. They came up top to the deck only a couple of times per day. His interest was both personal and professional. His historian's instincts were roused by their presence and his loneliness soothed by the homeliness of their talk. Here were the seeds of the new country, the legacy of the old. What these poor immigrants knew and valued was what would endure to be passed on. If one were hand-picking the repository of Scottish culture, he thought it might not contain such things as a recipe for warts about which an elderly woman was berating her long-suffering daughter-in-law. "I did tell you, Katie Mac, and why you chose to leave my nice dry toady behind, when you could find room to bring all yon rubbish that we be squatting on and picking out from under our hurdies, day and night." But that would last too, right along with the folk songs and prayers, with the woven wool and the Celtic patterns of their art. He fondly remembers Mrs. Graham having used dried toad as a treatment for a wart he'd once had. A passenger asks if her children may touch the iron horseshoe. Roger agrees. He knows there is belief to gain luck and to help heal illnesses or disease from iron. In real life, so you know, there is something called a lucky iron fish. It heals anemia in parts of the world where iron-rich foods are in short supply. It's an economical and easy way for families in need to get enough iron. Roger thinks the intake of iron would prove more useful than touching the horseshoe. The limited diet offered to the passengers resulted in loose teeth, itching boils, and fever. I expect their immune systems to be quite low, with the living conditions, stress, lack of fresh foods, and malnourishment. The passengers did not complain about the food and water given. It was enough. Though the crew was fed somewhat better, Roger noticed the impact of vitamin deficiency, because of the lack of fresh vegetables, was having on his gums. Manning the waterline and doling out the provision to the passengers, Morag, the young woman he noticed on the quay before she boarded at Inverness, came up in line. They discussed the weather before she went to go back below. Another woman prods her to ask for more water rations since she's nursing a baby. Morag was deeply embarrassed by the public nature of this request. With the extra provision in her bucket, she gave him a warm smile and appreciation before going below. When the waterline concluded, Roger was sad to see the passengers go. He envies the connectedness they seem to share. He misses Brianna each minute of each day. He chooses the illusion of solitude after eating in the mess hall. He had the second watch, so he inhabits his small hammock inches away from the next seaman. His hammock was near the bulkhead, so he only had one other person to deal with. He reflects on the musical sounds of the ship drowning out everything else while he conjures up Brianna. He thinks of his peace of mind being taken away when she went through the stones. He remains in a state of fear, anger, and betrayal. The same question ran round and round inside his mind without answers, a snake chasing its tail. Why had she gone? What was she doing? Why didn't she tell him? It was the effort to come up with an answer to the first of these that kept him going over and over it, as though the answer might afford him the key to the whole mystery of Brianna. Yeah, he'd been lonely. Knew bloody well what it felt like to have no one in the world who belonged to you, or you to them. But surely that was one reason why they had reached out to each other, he and Brianna. He thinks Claire understands the loneliness and made sure Brianna wouldn't be left alone and to be loved well. He tried to love her well. Thinking of her made his body grow uncomfortable in response, his need for her ever present. He didn't hesitate when he realized she had gone through the stones and he had to follow her. He'd known from the first moment of realization that he must follow her. Sometimes, though, he was not sure whether he had come to save her or to savage her, anything, so long as it was settled once and for all between them. He'd said he'd wait, but he'd waited long enough. The worst of it was not the loneliness, he thought, flinging restlessly over again, but the doubt of her feelings and of his, panic that he did not truly know her. For the first time since his passage through the stones, he realized what she had meant in refusing him and knew her hesitance for wisdom. But was it wisdom, and not only fear? If she had not gone through the stones, would she have turned to him, at last, wholeheartedly, or turned away, always looking for something else? It was a leap of faith, to throw one's heart across a gulf and trust another to catch it. His own was still in flight across the void with no certainty of landing, but still in flight. Brianna did a mess on Roger's head. She really has. The rhythmic sounds on the other side of the bulkhead resume. Whoever the couple was, they had sex nearly every night after everyone else was thought to be asleep. At first the sounds made him feel isolated because he had no access to such physical or emotional warmth. Eventually the sounds of tender words or furtive affirmations brought him a sense of not being a voyeur, but as a participant in some way. Not knowing who it was, he liked to think it was the fair-haired man and his wife Morag because of the way they looked at each other. He would have sold his soul to know such certainty. Ah, poor Roger. Having Brianna leave without a word or explanation after putting off his proposal brings up his insecurities in their relationship. He is without a doubt risking everything following her. To know he was doing the right thing, to know she would be happy to see him, to know she would accept his love and return love to him. He isn't sure at all, yet he followed her anyway. After the years of being an only child, then losing the Reverend, Roger understands the connection love could bring. He felt that with Brianna. He is a good man. Chapter 38. For those in peril on the sea. Roger is utterly exhausted. His muscles quivered, heaving the cask of water to the deck. He splashed precious water on his face, fearing he wouldn't be able to ladle the water rations without falling in. The boat rocked and pitched in the post-storm seas. The passengers coming to fill their jars and buckets looked worse off than him. The young girl he helped aboard came to deck skipping and singing without any ill effects from the movement of the boat. She starts a conversation about the storm and the Kieran, I believe it's pronounced, with Roger.
Do you think 'twas the Kieran caused the storming, Mr. Mackenzie? Granda says it was like enough. They lashed your great huge tales about you, ken. That's what makes the waves go so big.
I should not be thinking such a thing myself. There's your brothers, then Alianan.
Fevered. Have you seen a Kieran then? Are they really big enough to swallow the boat?
Myself has not seen one. Roger dropped his dipper and grabbed her by the apron sash, pulling her firmly off the rail. Have a care, aye. It would take no more than a spratling to swallow you, lassie.
Look,
she shrieked, leaning farther over in spite of his grasp.
Look, it is.
The girl shrieks, thinking she sees a sea monster in the water. Roger assures her it's nothing but a shark, like they ate last week. The girl calms down and must leave Roger to do chores as her mother calls for her. Isabel. For the most part, Roger can forget the Gloriana is merely inhabiting the surface of the vast sea that could destroy her in moments if it chose to. He worries that the Philip Alonso didn't arrive safely. He thinks of a prayer for those in peril on the deep. Lord, have mercy. Its meaning quite vivid and understanding to Roger now. As he finished his water duty, a mother asked him if the captain would rub his ring on the poor baby's sore eyes. He hesitated because he liked to steer clear of the captain. but he takes her anyway, knowing the captain had offered such a blessing before. He found the captain in conversation about some spoiled tea and how to salvage the rest. The captain obliged the request, rubbing the gold ring over the baby's eyes. The ring seemed smaller than a man's ring to Roger, perhaps a woman's ring. It seemed odd to see a love token on such a man's finger. Dixon, the mate, thinks the baby is ill, even though the mother says it's only milk fever and nothing of concern. So I looked at milk fever. I couldn't find anything except mastitis fever for a mother, but I did post a link for various rashes that children can get. That is not smallpox. Children still today get rashes for all sorts of things. Most are fairly benign. Roger grows concerned over the length of time it might take to get to Wilmington because of the many stops Bonnet would want to make the most of selling his cargo. He hopes they would make North Carolina in 8 weeks because they've been making good progress. Roger would disembark at the first stop. Since he wouldn't be taking wages, he thinks not finishing the offload would be a fair trade-off. Roger still had hours to go on his shift, and his exhaustion hadn't waned. He thinks of the cargo, and something about it makes him uneasy. There was something about the smell that reinforced his desire to be off the ship at the earliest opportunity. He was woken out of a deep sleep 2 nights later by shouting above. Dixon kept him from going up the ladder. Roger wonders if they've been boarded, but Dixon says to stay below because there are passengers with the pox. To the horror of the others, Roger insists on going above to see what is happening. He is immune and cannot become ill, so his curiosity wins out. He discovers there is no other ship, and there is no mutiny. Roger is ordered below, but he stays, having had pox as a child. There is the threat of throwing an ill child overboard. A row between the shipman and the mother ensues, with Roger grabbing the child. It was the baby from 2 days earlier, who Dixon swore was ill. Someone rammed into Roger, causing him to fall as men from the below deck came up to join the fight. Sheer confusion and chaos overcame the deck. Finally, after taking an injury, Roger is helped up by some of the crewmen. He promptly vomited over the side of the rail. He made his way below, refusing to answer questions, covering his head in his bunk. One of the men spoke to Roger. "Pox? What the hell is going on up there?" "It's for the best, lad," Hutchinson had said to him with gruff sympathy, passing by as he puked his guts out over the rail. "Pox spreads like wildfire. None in that hold would live to make landfall. Did we not take out the sick?" And was this better than slower death of scabs and fever? Not for those left behind. The wail went on, lancing the silence, piercing wood and heart alike. Something bumped softly, sliding past the hull, and he rolled into a shivering ball, oblivious alike to the sweltering heat in the hold and the sleepy complaint of the man next to him. No, not empty. He had heard the seaman say that sharks never sleep. "Oh, God! Oh, God!" He should have been praying for the dead, but could not. He rolled again, squirming, trying to escape, and in the echo of futile prayers found memory. The misplaced hearing of those few frantic words panted in his ear during those moments of unthinking frenzy. "For the love of God, man," the fair-headed man had said. "For the love of God, let her go." He straightened and lay stiff, bathed in cold sweat. 2 figures in the shadow, and the open hatchway to the store's hold some 20 feet away. "Oh, God," he said again, but this time it was a prayer. The ill were being thrown overboard. Roger couldn't stand knowing this. Roger went down to the hold at his first opportunity. He made up a reason in case anyone asked. He was compelled to look for someone hiding out down there. There was someone there. It was Morag and her baby. Roger has no idea who Morag is, but her husband is a Mackenzie. She is frightened and fearful he is going to kill her baby. "What the hell?"
She kicked at him and tried to bite, but he ignored this. He got a good grip on the scruff of her neck and hauled her out of the shadows into the dim brown light of the hold. "What are you doing here?" "Nothing. Let go. Let me go, please. Please, I beg you, sir." Force not availing to free herself, she weighed perhaps half what he did. She turned to pleading words pouring out in a half-whispered stream of desperation. "For the sake of your own mother, sir. You cannot do it. Please, you cannot let him kill him, please." "I'm not going to kill anyone, for God's sake. Hush yourself." He follows her when the baby starts to cry hungrily. He tells her he will not harm them and wants to know what she's doing down there. The baby has a rash. She's sure it's not the pox, but is in terrible fear for his life after the prior event. She stabbed Roger when he reaches for the baby. It was life or death in her mind. They plan for Roger to help her while the baby's rash improves. Roger examines the baby, and he doesn't seem sick, but he does have a rash with pustules on his cheeks. She tells him in a few days it will pass. He helps her to her feet and asks her her age. "How old are you?" he asked suddenly. He caught the gleam of her eyes, surprised, and then the flash of teeth. "Yesterday I was 22. Today I'm maybe 100. The small damp hand pulled free of his, and she melted back into the darkness. Roger has taken on a huge and dangerous responsibility. He cannot help himself, the son of a reverend. He must help people. This is like Brianna taking on Lizzie because of the desperation of the situation. Chapter 39. A Gambling Man. It was a foggy morning. It seemed the Gloriana floated rather than sailed in the sunless day. Roger used the fog to his advantage to visit the hold, bringing necessaries to Morag. Diana's description of the fog brings it to life. The baby is red-faced with pustules, though not fevered, and appears overall healthy. Morag looked too thin, pasty, and worn from the strain. She needed only a couple more days for the child to be completely well. Roger was sure Morag was right. The baby did not have the pox. He returned to the deck unseen. Or did he? As Roger moved toward the stern, he heard the whoosh of a whale in the water. Someone yelled, "Whale!" and heard the sound again. Roger wondered how big the whales were. Again, a whale jolted the ship. Cries of fear could be heard. The voice of the captain rang clear to Roger. "Barnacles," said a soft Irish voice from the mist behind him. Despite himself, Roger jumped, and a low chuckle materialized into Bonnet's shadowed bulk. The captain held a cheroot between his teeth, a spill from the galley fire illuminating the lines and planes of his face, dissolute in red light. The rasping shudder came again through the boards. "They scratch themselves to rid their skins of parasites," Bonnet said casually. "We are no more to them than a floating stone." He drew heavily to start the flame, blew fragrant smoke, and tossed the burning paper overboard. It vanished into the mist like a falling star. Roger worries Bonnet could have seen his subversive activities. He asks if the whales won't harm the ship. Bonnet doesn't know whether they will or not. He'd seen a ship smashed to bits from an angry rail once. Bonnet refuses to worry about such things. "'Twould be a waste of strength to worry myself. A wise man leaves those things beyond his power to the gods, and prays that Danu will be with him." The edge of the captain's hat turned toward him. "You know of Danu, will you, Mackenzie?" "Danu?" Roger said stupidly. Then the penny dropped. An old chant coming back to him from the mists of childhood. Something Mrs. Graham had taught him to say. "Come to me, Danu, change my luck. Make me bold, give me wealth and love to hold." There was an amused grunt behind the coat. "Ah, and you not even an Irishman. But sure I knew you from the first for a man of learning, Mackenzie." "I know Danu the luck-giver," Roger said, hoping against hope that
That particular Celtic goddess was both a good sailor and on his side. He took a step backward, meaning to go, but a hand descended on his wrist, holding tight. Bonnet is in full command of a ship and everyone on it. His grip tightens on Roger's wrist. Roger breaks free, but he knows he could die right there.
Why, the woman's no looker, sure, and a man of learning too. Would you risk my ship adventure, then, only for the sake of a warm body?
No risk. The words came out hoarse, forced through a tight throat. Come at me, he thought, and his hands curled at his sides. Come at me and give me a chance to take you with me.
The child does not have pox, a harmless rash. You will forgive my putting my ignorant opinion above your own, Mr. Mackenzie, but I'm captain here.
The voice was still soft, but the venom was clear.
It is a child, for God's sake. It is, and of no value.
No value to you, perhaps. There was a moment's silence, broken only by a distant whoosh in the empty white.
And what value to you? Why?
For the sake of a warm body. Yes, for that, for the touch of humanity, the memory of tenderness, for the feeling of life stubborn in the face of death.
For pity? For pity. She is poor. There was no one to help her.
For pity. She is poor, and there was no one to help her. The exchange coolly escalates. Roger waits for a punch to be thrown. Instead, Bonnet pulls a coin from his pocket.
Oh, pity. And did ye say you were a gambling man at all, Mackenzie?
He held out the shilling, dropped it. Roger caught it only by reflex.
For the sucklin's life, then,
Bonnet said, and the tone of light amusement was back.
A gentleman's wager, shall we call it? Heads it lifts, and tail it dies.
Uh-huh. Heads it lifts, and tails it dies. Roger's mind goes sharp and clear. He sizes up how he would move quickly to throw Bonnet overboard. The coin is flipped.
It seems Dano is with you the night, sir.
Bonnet's soft Irish voice seemed to come to him from a great way off as the captain bent and picked up the coin. Realization was only beginning to bloom in his chest when the captain gripped his shoulder, turning him down the deck.
You'll walk with me a while, Mackenzie.
Oh, yeah, sure. Someone's threatening to kill a baby and probably threatening Roger to kill him. And no problemo, I'll go for a walk with you, sir. Somehow Roger stayed upright and walked with Bonnet. Roger drifts back to his senses, realizing Bonnet is telling his life story. The captain was orphaned in Sligo and worked as a cabin boy on trading ships. During one winter, he found work in Inverness digging the foundation of a grand house. Could you imagine what grand house that would be?
I was just 17, the youngest of the crew of workmen. I could not say why it was they hated me, but mayhap it was my manner, for that was rough enough, or jealousy for my size and strength. They were an unchancy, way-faced lot. Or maybe that the lasses smiled at me, or maybe 'twas only that I was a stranger.
He was not popular with the other workers until it was the day to lay the foundation. Suddenly he was invited to drink with them. He became drunk quickly, and they tossed him over the wall into the cellar.
All of them were there, the workmen. Another man was with them too. One of them had a lantern, and when he held it up, I could see the man was Daft Joey. Daft Joey was a beggarman that lived beneath the bridge. He had no teeth. He ate rotten fish and floated dung from the river, and he stank worse than a blackbirder's hold.
Bonnet realized they meant to kill him.
They talked before while they worked. A sacrifice, they said, for the foundation, lest the earth tremble and the walls collapse. But I had not listened, and if I had, would not have guessed that they meant any more than to chop the head off a cockerel and bury it, as was usual.
Roger felt ill for the telling. Bonnet continued.
So they palavered for a bit, and on the beggarman began to make noise, for he wanted more drink. And at last the chief said it was not worth so much talk. He would throw for the choice. Then he took a coin from his pocket, and he said to me, laughing, "Will you take heads or tails, then, man?" I was too sick to say a word. The sky was black and whirling round, and bits of light kept flickering at the edges of my eyes, like fallen stars. So he set it for me. By Geordie's head should I live, and by his arse I should die, and he threw the shilling up in the air. It came down in the dirt by my head, but I had nae strength to turn and look.
Bonnet survived that day with wages in hand along with the coin. Roger asked if he ever found the men again. Bonnet found them all one by one and made the men pay for what they did to him. Bonnet asked Roger again if it is a fair chance. As in a dream, Roger felt the weight of the shilling drop once more into his hands. He heard the suck and hiss of the water on the hull, the blowing of the whales, and the suck and hiss of Bonnet's breath as he drew on his cigar. 7 whales to fill of a Kieran croon. A fair chance. Luck was with you before, Mackenzie. See, will Danu come for you again, or will it be the Soul Eater this time? The fog had closed over the deck. There was nothing visible save the glowing coal of Bonnet's cigar, a burning cyclops in the mist. The man might be a devil indeed, one eye closed to human misery, one eye open to the dark, and here Roger stood quite literally between the devil and the deep blue sea, with his fate shining silver in the palm of his hand. "It is my life. I'll make the call," he said, and was surprised to hear his voice calm and steady. Tail is mine." He threw and caught, clapped his one hand hard against the back of the other, trapped the coin and its unknown sentence. He closed his eyes and thought just once of Brianna. "I'm sorry," he said silently to her, and lifted his hand. Roger realized he was standing alone. Luck was with him once again. Holy hell, poor Roger Mack. He helped someone in need because he cannot help himself. He put his life in jeopardy for being kind. Twice the hand of death was missed. Bonnet is not safe in any regard. He's the most kind of dangerous person. He has his own code. He is mercenary and merciless. He's a wolf in captain's clothing, that Bonnet. Woo! So Roger saved the life of the baby not once but twice. Saved his own life. Got the crap beat out of him. I mean, come on. This poor guy is really earning his 18th century street cred, isn't he? For being a man of such learning. Wow. I like these chapters that are all about Roger. Coming up next is chapter 40 of Drums of Autumn. And if it looks like it's going to be a shorter podcast like this one, which I had no idea would be this short with 3 chapters, I will tack on the following one as well. But it just depends on how long it will be. Somebody asked the question on the YouTube channel when the Denver Comic-Con panel is going to be exactly. I have not been given our time slot. It is sometime between June 15th and 17th. I'm not sure yet exactly when it will be. And as soon as I know, I will put it on the page and put it on all the social media places. And I will announce it on the podcast, of course. Whew. That was a lot to get through. I don't know about you, but Stephen Bonnet, wow. He's a whole different kind of terrible. I love the villains that Diana writes. I mean, we have, of course, Blackjack Randall. We have Uncle Dougal to some degree. We have Leary. She's a villain in her own right. She just never stops coming around, right? She seems like she's the forever annoying villain. And who might else we see along the way? We don't know. Well, Roger is close to North Carolina, and Brianna is only a couple of weeks ahead of him at this point. So, we'll see what happens next. So where do you find A Dram of Outlander? Well, of course, the website, adramofOutlander.com. Facebook page is A Dram of Outlander, as is the group. The group is private, so you have to ask to join. There are 3 simple questions. I must be sure you are not a bot or a troll of any kind, but it's a great place, and it's really for you guys. The page is really for me to post things and have you interact, but the group is for you to interact with each other. It's not about my posts only, and it doesn't only have to be about Outlander either. On Instagram and Twitter, it's Dram of Outlander. And I want to hear from you. What do you think about this stuff? What do you think of Roger Mack? When people say he's boring, I have no idea what they're talking about. I love Roger Mack. He's kind of the best of all worlds. He's sort of like a tough Highlander when he needs to be, but he's also a man of learning and history. He's a great combination. I think he would be like my honey in the Outlander series. He's kind of all the things, which I like. And he has deep loyalty, which is a good quality, especially in the 18th century when things are so topsy-turvy all the time. But the call-in number is 719-425-9444. The email is contact@adramaofoutlander.com. And you want to know how to help the podcast? I'll let you know. Go into Apple Podcasts and leave a review in iTunes. You can leave a review on Spotify or Google Play or Stitcher. That helps people find me. And if you give me 5-star reviews, it puts me higher on the list when people search for something like Outlander podcast or Diana Gabaldon podcast, whatever those keywords are. Oh, I did hear some Outlander news that they're in the last of their shooting block. So they only have 3 episodes left before it goes into post-production and all the other things. And per Diana at that tea that I was at, she said they're looking at an early September release if possible. I forgot to add that last podcast. So they should be back in the fall. They have a really harsh shooting schedule. But as we get closer to the end of spring and early summer, there are some conventions that are strictly Outlander related going on, and we know that the cast is going to be at some events. So filming has to be done pretty soon. The other ways that you can help the podcast are by sharing it, telling people about it, interacting on the page in the group, on Twitter and Instagram, telling people about me, having them come and take a listen. Word of mouth is the best way possible. And the last way that you can help the podcast is, of course, financially. I'm a solo podcaster who does everything in the back end and front end and all the infrastructure myself. So there's a patreon.com page where you can offer as little as $1 a month, and every dollar counts, trust me. Or if you want to make a one-time offering, you can leave me a voice message or email me and I will tell you how to do that. And I appreciate every single one of you who's helped out financially. It makes a huge difference in my world, which makes a difference in your world ultimately, and listening. And as always, I think you guys are the best listeners. I just feel like we keep growing and moving along, and let's see where it takes us. Oh, if you are an Outlander-inspired artist, I would love to give one of your products away on the show. Fan art has proved to be some incredibly beautiful pieces. I'm stunned by the talent of those who are Outlander fans. So if you'd like to contribute a piece, that would be great. And I'm looking for inspired swag to have as some prizes for the Denver Comic-Con panel. So please contact me again at contact@adramaofoutlander.com, or you can leave a voicemail message, 719-425-9444. So thank you for listening. And until next time, Slán Java.